broadband across the state, with those two things being in tension, right? So I think that there is a nuance, probably a nuanced but important discussion in front of us about how we achieve the goal of competition that drives innovation and drives down cost, and also access and affordability in places where the population isn't nearly as sparse. And so the cost of laying down that fiber becomes more of a challenge. And so what do we do about that to make sure that we're getting to all parts of the state? I had the privilege of joining with a group of nurses and healthcare providers, not last summer, but the summer before, and we were talking about healthcare delivery across the state of Minnesota and telehealth and telemedicine. And it's been a while since I've practiced in a hospital. I'm a surgical nurse by affection now. I don't practice anymore. And there I learned that through the Skype and other means, not only is healthcare being practiced across the state of Minnesota, but very technical procedures are being coached and guided between providers from a regional center to a more rural area. When I learned that physician assistants and nurse practitioners were placing chest tubes in patients in remote parts of the state using the guide of a physician at the other end of the internet, I was both intrigued and amazed. And when I think about that capacity, it makes Minnesota not more remote, all its corners, but instead it makes us smaller. And for people who have lived in greater Minnesota for all their lives and are going to live there, raise their families there, they're going to retire there, and they'll probably end their lives there, it is important. It's really important that we have access to adequate health care across the state of Minnesota. You shouldn't have to come to St. Cloud or Duluth or the Twin Cities or Rochester to get emergency care or critical care. And while we're not going to deliver every kind of care in every corner of the state, if you need a chest tube, you want to be able to get it. You want to get it delivered safely. And I learned that there's a way to do that, but it's going to require broadband, right, across the state of Minnesota. There are lots of examples that I've learned of this summer and fall. I had the good fortune of combining some corn this fall, and I was in that giant combine. I actually got to drive it, and there was a GPS and a computer in there that was guiding that work. That requires, good internet access, does it not? I was at North Central Hennepin College yesterday and learned there that they're delivering a 4-year degree through a relationship with Moorhead State University. But they're not actually teaching the classes in Anoka County. They're teaching the classes up in Moorhead. And that's happening via the internet and broadband. There are many, many ways that we are seeing the impact of the community in which we live and the impact of broadband. When I think about our future, of our aging population, of the younger and smaller population underneath that, and what that means for our economy, it is going to be dependent upon our ability to be productive. And part of that productivity and innovation is going to come through information delivered across the state, and that's going to require broadband. So I think that I am probably making a better case for why we need to do this, right, than I am the solution. And I want to listen to you, both to your questions and the responses, to better understand how we move forward. But I do think it's really important for the state of Minnesota. I want to say one more time, we all come from somewhere. If it's St. Francis or St. Cloud or St. Bonifacius or St. Paul, we all come from someplace. And all those places matter, and that's why this is important. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Amen, Representative Murphy. You're a quick study, and again, I look forward to working with you on this as well. Folks, if we could just recognize all of our panelists one more time here. Thank you very much. What a great cross-section of perspectives, and we really hit upon so many applications and really got to the question of why this is important. I want to quit my talking. I want to turn this over to you. We have about 15 minutes left here. If there are any questions, flag down, gentlemen to either side. Folks, don't be shy. We want to have a good exchange here, so let's kick it off right now. And please state your name and your background real quick if you could before your question.
Jean Lee. I'm head of APAC, Asian Pacific American Housing Consortium. In the ideal world, when you talk about use of broadband and access by people in greater Minnesota and so forth, someone mentioned regulations as being a barrier, cost being a barrier, but what else needs to be removed to have your ideal world?
Panelists, would anyone like to take a crack at that?
I'd take snow away.
Take snow away. Representative, you're coming from the industry. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you. That's a very interesting question. It's a complex world that we have, especially when you get into technology and broadband, whether it's education, healthcare, you're trying to start an innovative company. In an ideal world, we have demand that is being met by supply. We have people that are able to afford and purchase and innovate, and those innovation dollars are able to come back in investment, and we can keep that cycle going. I think because of the expectations that we have of usage of internet and the ubiquitous access, that this thought that I should be able to grab my phone and get anything at any time, that has permeated us a bit to forget that there are considerations out there, that there are people behind those that have to do those. So in an ideal world, everybody understands that everybody has a family to feed, and there's money that has to flow in that, and that comes from different levels. So I think a lot of times we think once we have the internet access that the whole world should come to me, and that comes at a cost. And there are people behind that, whether it's globally and so forth. And remember, every time we don't purchase something locally, whether that's that newspaper article or so forth, we're going to the AP, which is coming off a global network, which is not bringing dollars back to our community. So I think we just have to understand how the market works a little bit in this, and not realize that it's just going to happen.
Very good.
I have one thing to add to that. You know, the funding is a big component, but what we found is accountability is also a significant issue, and I think that comes down to more of the lack of regulations. If we don't have telephone service, we can call the PUC. If we don't have electric service or good gas service, or if we're having issues with that, we can call the PUC. If people don't get good sewer and water, they come to the city council meetings and start pounding their fists on the council chambers desks. But with broadband, our residents have found in Annandale, we have a rural area, but we're also we're a city, we're very populated. They don't have anywhere to turn to. And so they've come to us, and our hands are tied with the way the regulations are structured. So to us, it's a little bit, the funding's a significant issue, but the accountability, the lack of regulations to allow people to turn somewhere when they're paying for a service that they're not getting, and they're not getting a good service, is our issue.
All right. Well, thank you both. Any further thoughts? All right, other questions? Please, sir, your name first.
Gary Peterson, I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of Townships. And I want to thank the panel and the legislators for being here and taking this up. This is huge for our people in rural Minnesota. We've got a lot of people who want to stay on the farm, want to live in rural parts of the country, but they're not going to be farming. They're not going to actively farm. They need to be able to operate businesses. The only way they're going to do it is connect to the world. And I want to take my hat off and say you guys are doing a great job. Thanks for spreading this word. The question I have is there's federal dollars, there's some state dollars, maybe we can get some bonding. How can we get all parts of the government to work together so we're not wasting money, so we can get one common focus out here and really get the job done right? As we've heard today, it's not good enough just to have access. We need good access. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you for the question. Would anyone like to address that? Yeah, please, Representative Johnson.
Well, thank you for the question. One thing I guess I'd like to, Dana McKinsey's here. There she is. Everybody know her? She's heading up the Office of Broadband for the state of Minnesota, and one of the purposes of that office is to do exactly what you're suggesting, which is coordinate these different funding sources and target them in strategic ways, particularly in our underserved areas, so that we get the best bang for our buck. So the issue that you're presenting is one that's definitely one that is on our minds, and one that we want to pursue, and that's I think that's where we're heading with the new office. So stay on top of it, and let's see what we can get done, because we really are going to need a public-private partnership to make this happen. the model for private business to make a buck off some farm that's 10 miles out in the hinterland just doesn't work. So there's going to need some public assistance to make it work, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do. We just got to figure out what the best and most targeted way to do it is. But I think we can do it. We just got to work at it, have the will to do it.
If I could just add to that, and it's interesting because Representative Sheldon and I, on the House floor, actually, when this was being introduced, we were coming at it from different angles, but actually we're trying to solve the same problem. And I appreciate the fact that we have this office here. And to your point, and I talked a little bit to Dana, as you look at the Office of the Broadband and what was put in the statute, it's very large. And to be honest, what we have to do as legislators is we have to back off a little bit. We have to quit, we have to set some of our priorities aside, and we have to let that office do its job. And I think too often we get in and we start tinkering, and we can't do that here. And I also think this needs to come back to our constituents. Our constituents need to let us do a little bit of the work here and let some of this stuff happen, because too often, I can guarantee you I'll go back and I'll be told, don't spend another $1 on this, and then I'll be told, spend $10 on this. Well, we have to let some of this stuff come together. We have to let the coordination happen. We have to let good people like Dana do their job without all the government interference and noise that we sometimes bring to the table.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Mark.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things that kind of address